Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 68 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation R.E.C.E.S.S. We begin this segment with 4 of the 5 Sector V operatives walking around the Gallagher Elementary School playground during recess, naturally, and they all agree that today is a great day for recess. Eventually, number 5 notices the kid pushing number 3 on the swings, and number 4 becomes notably frustrated about this. Number 5 can't resist teasing number 4, but number 4 insists that his frustrations are because the kid is doing it wrong, in his words. Number 4 insists that you have to push someone really hard when you push someone on the swings. So number 4 pushes number 3 really hard on the swings, and when number 3 swings back, she accidentally hits number 4 and he gets sent flying. Number 4 ends up crashing onto the concrete of the basketball court, and this creates large cracks in the concrete. Liquid then emerges from the cracks, and number 1 tastes some of the liquid that fell on his head, and number 1 realizes that this liquid is salad oil. An unspecified amount of time passes by, and we're now in Mrs. Thompson's classroom. Mrs. Thompson is giving a lecture that most would probably consider to be boring, but the students actually look like they're interested in the lecture, and they act disappointed when Mrs. Thompson ends the lecture and says that it's time for them to go out for recess. The students insist that they want to stay in the classroom and learn more, and Mrs. Thompson does appreciate their sudden interest in learning, but she says something along the lines about how recess is a great way for them to get some exercise, and she urges them to head out for recess, and they do so begrudgingly on their part. We quickly discover why the students are no longer excited about recess when we see that the playground now looks like an outdoor factory. That's the best way I can think to describe the playground's new look. And we see that the ice cream men are supervising these students and forcing them to operate the machinery of this outdoor factory in order to pump more salad oil from the ground. The Sector V operatives have gathered together, and they all agree that it's disappointing that recess has now been turned into a work camp. They actually call it that later on in the segment. Number 5 then notices that Gallagher Elementary School's Principal Saurbraten, is talking to someone that they don't recognize. We the viewers quickly learn that Principal Saurbraten is talking to Principal Smelling. He's telling Principal Smelling about how they've been able to pump more salad oil from the ground after turning recess into a work camp. And Principal Saurbraten also comments about how delicious this salad oil is. Principal Smelling responds that he will determine for himself if the salad oil is delicious or not. And Principal Smelling is about to taste the salad oil, but he's interrupted by number 1 when number 1 approaches the principals, and number 1 comments about how it does taste pretty good for salad oil, in his words. Principal Smelling inquires about who number 1 is, and Principal Saurbraten responds that number 1 is one of the more active students, in his words. Number 1 responds that he prefers the term proactive, and Principal Saurbraten threatens to put number 1 in detention, but Principal Smelling tells Principal Saurbraten not to pay any more attention to number 1. They have bigger things to talk about in Principal Saurbraten's office. So number 1 follows the principals without them realizing this, and when number one reaches the room just before Principal Saurbraten's office, he sees Lizzie is in the room, and Lizzie refuses to let number one listen in on the conversation in Principal Saurbraten's office. Lizzie says the last time she let number one listen in on a conversation in Principal Saurbraten's office, or at least the last time she let number one do something similar to that, Lizzie ended up in a very specific type of detention. Number one insists that it's important for him to listen in on this conversation because the fate of recess depends upon it, but Lizzie acts dismissive towards this reason, and she even comments that she thinks the current state of recess at Gallagher Elementary School is better than kids just running around in circles, in her words. Number one responds that not all kids are willing to, number one responds by saying not all kids are willing to give up their recess time for extra credit like Lizzie is. And number one does try to listen in on the conversation, but Lizzie stops him and repeats that she isn't going to let number one listen in on this conversation. Number one then tries to strike a deal with Lizzie. Number one says if Lizzie lets him listen in on the conversation between the two principals, then he will go out on a date with her. Lizzie likes the sound of this, but she brings up how on a previous date, number one sent a robot duplicate in his place. Number one assures Lizzie he wouldn't think to send a robot duplicate again, and Lizzie accepts this answer and she becomes excited about the date. Number one places his ear to the door so he can listen in on the conversation between the principals. Principal Saurbraten and Principal Smelling are planning to host a conference at Gallagher Elementary School tonight. They call it the We Hate Kids Conference. And they're planning to invite the principals of the other schools in town. And their hope is to have the other principals taste the salad oil. And they're hoping that the other principals will find the salad oil to be delicious. And this is because Principal Saurbraten and Principal Smelling have reason to believe that their salad oil, the Principal Saurbraten and Principal Smelling have reason to believe that there's salad oil underneath the other schools in town. And their hope is that if the principals of the other schools in town find the salad oil to be delicious, then they will turn recess at their respective schools into work camps and pump more salad oil from the ground. That's essentially their plan. Number one says to himself in a confident manner that the kids next door will put a stop to this plan. So the next scene is a later point in time, and we're at the Sector V treehouse, where the Sector V operatives are preparing for their mission to save recess, with number one giving his teammates a pep talk. Before the Sector V operatives can actually head off to Gallagher Elementary School, however, Lizzie arrives and she warns number one that he better not have forgotten about the date that he promised her. So the Sector V operatives and Lizzie are in the elevator right now, and number five assures Lizzie that number one is going to go on the date with her. The rest of the Sector V operatives are just going to prepare number one. They're planning to get him ready for the date. And number five encourages Lizzie to just wait patiently in a room, and number one will be back not too much later. Lizzie accepts this reasoning or justification, but she makes a point to stress that she can tell the difference between a robot duplicate and the actual number one. So the Sector V operatives are in the elevator again, and number one is wondering what he's going to do. Number five encourages number one to just go on the date with Lizzie and assures him that the rest of the team will be able to handle the mission by themselves, or just among the four of them at least. Number one, though, insists that he should participate on this mission because he considers this mission to be much more important than the movie that Lizzie wants to see. He mentions the title of the movie, and number 3 recognizes the title, and she becomes really excited. She starts to inquire number 1 about if they can watch the movie, and this gives number 5 an idea. We then head to the movie theater, and we see Lizzie has gone to the movie theater with number 3, who is impersonating number 1. Yes, number 3 is wearing a disguise to look like number 1, and she's also using a 2x4 technology device called the vocal yokel in order to imitate number 1's voice. So while number 3 impersonating number 1 goes to see the movie with Lizzie, the 4 other Sector V operatives make their last-minute preparations at the treehouse, and then they use a transport system from the treehouse to get to Gallagher Elementary School. And the 4 Sector V operatives are tampering with the pipes of the salad oil tank, and they're doing this while the principals from the other schools in town arrive at Gallagher Elementary School. The 4 present Sector V operatives intend to actually destroy the salad oil tank and cover the principals in the salad oil. Their line of thinking for this is along the lines of, they want salad oil, they'll get salad oil. That's essentially their idea for this particular plan. And while they're making their preparations for the plan, we do see a few scenes of number 3 impersonating number 1 and Lizzie watching the movie. And eventually, Lizzie gets teary-eyed during the movie, and one of Lizzie's tears falls on the vocal yokel, which causes it to short circuit. And number 3 tries to make a run for it, and Lizzie comes to the conclusion that number 3 was a robot duplicate rather than a human impersonating number 1. And Lizzie chases after number 3. Back at Gallagher Elementary School, number 1 is on the rooftop of Gallagher Elementary School, and he's reached a skylight, and he removes one of the glass frames of the skylight. This skylight is looking in on, this skylight is above the room of the school where the meeting is being held, or where the conference is being held. And yes, during the conference, Principal Smelling is repeating his plan. Yes, Principal Smelling insists that it's his plan. But yes, Principal Smelling is repeating the plan about convincing the other principals to turn the recess at their schools into work camps so that they can pump more salad oil from the ground. The end goal for doing this is that they're going to create their own brand of salad oil, Principal's Choice, I believe. Yes, Principal's Choice salad oil is their end game for this plan. So number 1 back with number 1, he's removed one of the glass parts of the skylight, and he's holding a remote control that will activate an explosion, which will cause the salad oil tank to explode and cover the school with salad oil. Number 1 is about to activate the remote control, but Lizzie arrives, and Lizzie's arrival startles number 1, and he drops the remote control. It lands in the salad of Principal Saurbraten. Principal Saurbraten. Yes, it lands in Principal Saurbraten's salad. That's what happens to the remote control. And Lizzie is holding, Lizzie has number 3 with her, and she comments about how number 1 thought he could trick Lizzie with another robot duplicate. Number 3 insists that she's not a robot, but Lizzie refuses to listen to number 3, or refuses to believe her. And number 1 tries to explain the importance of the mission, but Lizzie isn't really listening. But when Lizzie looks through the skylight, she thinks the party down there looks nice. And number 1 tries to explain to Lizzie that this is a conference to turn the recess of other schools into work camps, like what happened at Gallagher Elementary School. Lizzie, though, continues to act dismissive towards this mission, and she acts dismissive towards Recess in general. She calls Recess dumb, and number one responds that he doesn't want to be smart if Recess is dumb. And number one gives a speech about the importance of recess, how recess is, number one tells Lizzie, number one gives Lizzie a speech about how recess is a chance for kids to take a break from learning in school and give them a chance to just turn their brains off and have fun. And he thinks that having a little break from having to learn in school is really important for kids. And number one claims, though, that if the date means more to Lizzie, then he'll abort the mission and go on the date with her. Lizzie starts to cry tears of joy, but not for the reasons that number one thought. Lizzie's tears of joy are because she said that she never thought that number one would stop a mission to go on a date with her. And Lizzie says that they can still catch the rest of the movie, and Lizzie is hugging number one. And not only is she crying, but her nose starts to run. And one of her boogers lands in a salad. Yes, one of her boogers falls through the open part of the skylight, the part that number one opened up, and it lands on a salad. And one of the principals tastes the salad, and he shouts that the salad tastes like boogies, in his words. So most of the other principals, except for Saurbraten and Smelling, all believe this. They believe that the salad oil overall tastes like boogers, and so they start to leave. Principal Saurbraten, though, insists that the salad doesn't taste like boogers, so he starts to eat his salad in a very quick and hasty. Yes, in a very hasty and reckless manner. Principal Saurbraten is eating his salad to prove that it doesn't taste like boogers. And while he's being hasty, Principal Saurbraten's fork activates the remote control that fell in there. So the salad oil tank explodes, and the school is now covered with salad oil. So at a later point in time is the next scene. Yes, the next scene happens at a later point in time where Recess is back to its usual. Recess is back to normal at Gallagher Elementary School, and 4 of the 5 Sector V operatives are walking around, and they're glad that Recess is back to normal. And then they see that Lizzie has actually decided to participate in recess, or partake in recess. Number one is pushing Lizzie on the swings, and number one greets his teammates when they approach number one and Lizzie. But Lizzie swings back, and she accidentally hits number one. Number one gets sent flying, and when number one lands, another liquid emerges from the cracks, and number 5 tastes some of the liquid that fell on her head. And number 5 realizes that this liquid is prune juice. And that is how we end this segment. So there you go. This segment, this segment was the A segment for an episode that actually has something similar to what happened in Season 5. Yes, in Season 5, there was an episode where the A segment and the B segment were connected to each other in some way. In the case of Season 5, it was a scene in Operation Virus, and that the actions in that scene led to the events of Operation Outbreak occurring. Operation Outbreak was the result of the consequences of actions from a certain scene in Operation Virus. That's how the Season 5 episode, with 2 segments that relate to each other, went down. In the case of this episode, however, episode 68, the A segment and the B segment are connected to each other because the B segment is actually a midquill or an interquill. The B segment happens during the events of this segment, more specifically during the time frame when 4 of the 5 Sector V operatives go on the mission to save R.E.C.E.S.S at Gallagher Elementary School, and when number 3 impersonating number 1 goes to see the movie with Lizzie. During that time frame, that's when the B segment takes place. So yes, this season 6 episode is another example of an A segment and a B segment tying into each other in some way, but it's different compared to season 5. Yes, the season 5 episode, you could say that the B segment was an indirect sequel to the A segment, but like I said, for this season 6 episode, the B segment is a midquill or interquill for the A segment. And actually, yes, and they both do have a certain theme to them, but the A segment, this segment, is the one that really puts more focus on this theme. Yes, the main storyline or the main plot for this segment was saving R.E.C.E.S.S at Gallagher Elementary School. And this was actually the result of a request from the executives. Yes, Tom Warburton revealed on one of his blog posts that around the time when this segment was airing, around the time this segment premiered, and a little before that even, some schools were considering cutting back on R.E.C.E.S.S, and Cartoon Network was promoting a Save R.E.C.E.S.S campaign. Yes, Cartoon Network was promoting a Save R.E.C.E.S.S campaign in response to the possibility of some schools cutting back on R.E.C.E.S S, and the executives requested that Tom Warburton and the rest of the staff and crew of Codename Kids Next Door come up with a story about saving R.E.C.E.S S to tie into this campaign. And I'm sure that the other Cartoon Network shows that were going on around that time probably also were requested to come up with entries like that too, I'm guessing. But yes, Tom Warburton and the rest of the staff and crew of Codename Kids Next Door did go ahead with this request, and this actually does fit in with Codename Kids Next Door. Yes, I think this is a well-executed example of an entry that was requested by the executives. This goes to show that executive requests aren't always a bad thing. It really does depend on the execution, and I do think that Codename Kids Next Door executed this request from the executives very well. And yeah, I would say that the whole idea of saving R.E.C.E.S.S does fit in with Codename Kids Next Door's main theme. And like other entries in Codename Kids Next Door, Operation R.E.C.E.S.S took a mundane situation and presented it in an over-the-top manner. In this case, they went with the idea of R.E.C.E.S.S being turned into a work camp or an outdoor factory where kids are forced to pump salad oil from the ground. And yeah, it's over the top, but yeah, it does. You could say it does get the point about saving R.E.C.E.S.S across, even if it is a very exaggerated and over-the-top manner. And yeah, I do have to agree with the message about the importance of R.E.C.E.S.S. Yeah, like number 1 said in his speech to Lizzie, R.E.C.E.S.S is a chance for students to take a break from learning and just have some fun, and that's important. Like, yes, please don't misunderstand me. It is important to learn, and work is important too, but there's a reason why that whole saying about all work and no play exists, or the consequences of all work and no play. There's a reason that saying exists to warn others about not having a chance to take a break or smell the flowers or something along those lines. It's important to take a break. It's important to have fun too, while also upholding your responsibilities. And that's what R.E.C.E.S.S is for, a chance for kids to take a break from learning and unwind for some time during the school day. And R.E.C.E.S.S was definitely a big part of elementary school. For me, kindergarten too, yes. Kindergarten and elementary school, I definitely remember playing on the playground a lot during recess. I felt that my elementary school and my kindergarten had really nice playgrounds. I always had fun playing on those. And with regards to middle school, at least for my middle school, we didn't have a playground. We just went to the field in the back of the middle school, or sometimes we went to this isolated parking lot in the front. There weren't really many cars or vehicles parked in that specialized parking lot. But yeah, depending on the day, sometimes we would go out to the back of the field, or we'd go out to the front to that specialized parking lot in middle school. So yeah, there wasn't really a playground, but we still had recess, you could say, even if there wasn't a playground. And yeah, by high school, we didn't really have recess anymore. But yeah, lunchtime was extended to give us the students a chance to socialize. Cause yeah, we didn't always stay in the cafeteria. Like sometimes we'd gather just outside of the cafeteria, whether it's outside on the school grounds or out in the halls just outside the cafeteria. We would gather together and socialize too. Recess. Yeah, I would say recess is definitely good for the younger kids. That's my takeaway, is that the younger kids really do need recess is very important for younger kids. And even when students get older, time to take a break from the school day and just unwind or turn your brain off for a while. We still get that, even if it's not necessarily in the form of recess. But yeah, I definitely agree with the message that recess is important, and I do think that I do remember agreeing with that Save Recess campaign, and yeah, I do think Codename Kids Next Door executed the idea really well. Now, for other details regarding this segment, Principal Saurbraten and Principal Smelling, they're apparently based off of villains from the TV show Hogan's Heroes. Now, at the time when I first watched this segment, back when it first aired on TV, I hadn't seen Hogan's Heroes or even heard of it, so I didn't catch the reference. It flew over my head. It wasn't until years later when I was seeing some reruns of Hogan's Heroes, and then I saw two of the bad guys, and then I realized, oh, those must be the bad guys who inspired the two principals from Operation Recess. And yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. This isn't the first time where Codename Kids Next Door referenced an old TV show that I wasn't aware of beforehand, but years later I eventually saw the TV show that would inspire certain entries of Codename Kids Next Door. And yes, we get to meet Gallagher Elementary School's Principal Saurbraten, and we got to meet Principal Smelling, but they never really clarified what he was the principal of. Like, his word choice definitely suggested that he wasn't a co-principal of Gallagher Elementary School, because during the meeting in the office, when he was talking about how they were going to have the conference at Gallagher Elementary School, he called it Principal Saurbraten's school. So we never found out where Principal Smelling is the principal of exactly, although the way Principal Smelling acts towards Principal Saurbraten and the way Principal Saurbraten acts towards Principal Smelling, it does seem to give the impression that Principal Smelling has a higher rank in the hierarchy compared to Principal Saurbraten, even though they're both principals. But yeah, I guess that's up to FanWorks to try and offer some possible explanations for that detail. And otherwise, yes, I guess the detail with Lizzie is also notable. Yes, throughout most of the segment, Lizzie acted dismissive towards Recess. When you first watch the segment, it's easy to think that maybe Lizzie's dismissive nature towards, it's not hard to imagine that Lizzie's dismissive nature towards Recess is just like what number one figured, that she wanted to get more extra credit. But But now, knowing Lizzie's true identity, though, that does offer a different perspective on Lizzie's dismissive nature towards R.E.C.E.S.S. Yes, I don't want to give it away just yet for the sake of those who might just be following along with these recap and thoughts videos, or those who might not have seen that teaser that was released on an April Fool's Day in the hopes of trying to encourage the sequel series or spin-off series to be greenlit. We still don't have an official word on that as of the recording of this video. But yeah, fingers crossed that it does eventually happen. But yes, knowing Lizzie's true identity now, it actually does offer another possible or a very reasonable explanation for why Lizzie might not consider R.E.C.E.S.S to be very important at first. Although by the end of the segment, Lizzie came around to the idea of R.E.C.E.S.S, or she warmed up to the idea of R.E.C.E.S.S. But yes, like Lizzie's other major appearances, this is another example about how Lizzie's actions or Lizzie's thoughts or sentiments on certain details take on a different interpretation once you take her true identity into account. So otherwise, yes, I think that's about it. I did think, like I said, I thought that this segment was a good example of how you can have an entry that's requested by executives and still be well executed. And I do think that the idea of saving R.E.C.E.S.S fits in with Codename Kids Next Door. And they did their usual situation, took a mundane situation and presented it in an over-the-top manner. And like I said, it was this segment also was the first time I found out about Hogan's Heroes, even though I wasn't aware of it at the time when I first watched this segment. And like I said, Lizzie's role in this segment does continue to highlight how Lizzie's actions and thoughts take on a different meaning or different interpretation when you take her true identity into account. And like I said, the B segment will also tie into this segment being a midquill or an interquill rather than being an indirect sequel, like what happened with the season 5 episode that featured Operation Virus and Operation Outbreak. Although, yes, so there's a little bit of the Save R.E.C.E.S.S theme to the B segment, but really this segment was the one that really focused on that theme. And like I said, I think they executed that theme very well. So otherwise, there we go for now. So as of this video, we've now discussed the A segment of episode 68 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.